You know, today was already an incredibly crowded day of news. As Lawrence mentioned, we have filmmaker Michael Moore scheduled to be with us tonight. But we need to begin with breaking news from Madison. Breaking news from Madison, Wisconsin, which of course has been the center of American news for the past 3 weeks at least. Tonight, the Republicans in Wisconsin State Senate appear to have invented a new nuclear option for passing legislation with no notice and no quorum and no debate. They invented that new nuclear option today, and then they detonated it today. After Republican Governor Scott Walker admitted yesterday that he would negotiate with Democrats on his union stripping bill, after a Republican source tells NBC News that the governor said to Republicans in the legislature today that he was willing to compromise on union stripping, after public support for the governor and the union stripping measure started low and then cratered from there, after weeks and weeks of large demonstrations in Wisconsin against the governor and the Republican plan, including some very, very large demonstrations, and the Republican response to that of locking down the state capitol. After all of that, Republicans in Wisconsin State Senate tonight tried to pull a rabbit out of a hat. The way Democrats had stopped the bill, remember, was that they left the state. They denied Republicans the quorum they would need to convene in order to pass the union stripping bill. The Wisconsin rules are that no bill with fiscal implications can be considered without a certain number of senators present. Republicans needed at least one Democrat to show up to the Senate in order to meet that numerical threshold. Democrats fled the state so that quorum could not be reached, so the bill could not be voted on. Then tonight, with no warning, Republicans announced that they took everything budget-related out of what they were calling the budget bill, leaving only the union stripping provisions. Republicans, of course, had insisted that union stripping was a fiscal issue, but tonight, in order to try to pull this rabbit out of a hat, they decided it wasn't a fiscal issue anymore and that therefore they no longer needed that pesky quorum. And with no warning, they convened a conference committee, Democrats say in violation of the state's open meeting law. The last-minute conference committee passed the union stripping bill. Here's what this looked like. This was absolutely nuts. Watch this.
I have consulted with the Legislative Council, the Legislative Reference Bureau, and the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, and have been advised that this proposal would not trigger the special quorum requirement in Article 8, Section 8 of the Wisconsin Constitution. At this time, I would move to adopt the adoption of the proposal.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
As the conference
Mr. Chairman,
report.
excuse me. I have a question about the open meetings rule being violated. You were not given 2 hours notice, first of all. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, there's a requirement. I have like a 24-hour notice here from Attorney General Van Howell, the current Attorney General.
Representative Bartlett, let me discussion. Let me recognize you. Discussion. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, Mr. Chairman, most importantly, before we even get started, obviously I'm going to want to have a summary of this bill from our Director Lang, so I understand what's in here.
It's the same bill you debated for 60 hours.
Oh, there's nothing different?
No, they just removed items from it.
They removed what?
Removed items. Nothing new.
So we can get a description of what was removed.
There's nothing new.
Well, you said things were removed, Mr. Chairman. I want to know what's removed. It seems to me that the body should add, our committee should know what we're voting on. I don't know what was removed. I need to know that. So I do want a description from Director Lang. Secondly, I have a couple of motions I would like to make as amendments to this.
No motions.
Clearly,
no motions will be
conference committees do have an opportunity for people to amend a bill.
No, there's no motion.
So I want to be able to present those. But before we even get into that, I want to say that this is a violation of the open meetings law. It is required. I got a memo here from our current Attorney General, not a past one, the current one. August of 2010, the attorney, no Wisconsin court decision will allow meetings unless you have good cause to provide less than 24 hours notice of a meeting. Okay. The provision, like all other provisions of the open meetings laws, must be construed in favor of providing the public with the fullness and most complete information.
Representative Barca.
If there's any,
Clerk, call roll.
No, excuse me. No, listen, it says if there's any doubt as to whether good cause exists, the governmental body should provide 24 hours notice. This is clearly a violation of the open meetings law. Now, look, you've been shutting people down. It is improper for you to move forward while this is a violation of the open meetings law. You're not allowing amendments, and that is wrong. Now, Mr. Chairman, this is a violation of law. This is not just a rule, it is the law. There must be... No, Mr. Chairman, this is a violation of the open meetings law. It requires 24, at least 2 hours notice.
What have you done?
Okay. Excuse me.
Including that weird music thing at the end, that's how we all saw it. That was the Wisconsin Legislative Coverage Service wrapping up with that tidy little music after the Democratic Assembly leader is shouting that the meeting that he is in is illegal, is a violation of the state's open meeting law. He's saying that as they decide that they're just going to call the roll over him. And he's saying, this is illegal, this is illegal, this is illegal. And they're saying, we're adjourned. And then a nice little musical interlude. After that bizarre scene in that hastily convened conference committee, Republicans essentially rammed the Senate and immediately convened the state Senate, again, with no Democrats present, with no quorum. They passed the bill immediately, 18-1, and then they immediately adjourned. Took moments. If Republicans legally had this option of doing it this way, did they not have this option of doing it this way all along? Why didn't they use it before? It's not like Republicans were debating this thing on the merits all along. Remember, they tried to arrest the Senate Democrats. They took over the Senate Democrats' offices. They were threatening to send private security, essentially bounty hunters, after the Democrats. They were taking the Democrats' parking places. But all along, they could have just done this anytime they wanted to, and they just decided to do it tonight. Where did they find this rabbit, and what hat have they just pulled it out of? Democratic leadership in the legislature says the Republicans' actions tonight were as illegal as they were surprising, that the Republicans never used this option for getting their way before because this option does not legally exist. Democrats say they are contacting the state's attorney general to try to block tonight's actions. The shouts of protesters could be heard outside that dark conference committee room tonight as the Republicans suddenly convened, suddenly voted, and suddenly adjourned. After Republicans lost the public debate on this issue, after Democrats and the anti-union stripping protesters won the public debate on this issue, after Wisconsin took to the streets and Democratic senators held out and they won on the substance, after that most important result really was nailed down and finalized, Republicans tried to find a desperate way to cram it through anyway tonight, after they lost the argument. Protesters are reassembling in Madison at the Capitol right now. Joining us now is State Senator Jon Erpenbach, one of Wisconsin's 14 Democratic state senators who remain outside the state. Senator Erpenbach, what is your understanding of what the Republicans just did tonight?
Well, obviously what they did is they certainly violated the open meetings laws in the state of Wisconsin. And what Representative Barca, the Assembly Democrat leader, had in his hands was something from a Republican Attorney General in the state of Wisconsin. So odds are this probably will end up in court. But in the meantime, what they did was they took out everything they said was non-fiscal, even though they've been saying the collective bargaining language was fiscal all along, which is why they didn't do this early on. And they passed it in the course of just a few seconds on the Senate floor. So you're talking about 5 or 6 decades worth of workers' rights just stomped out within a matter of minutes in the state Senate today. So obviously we're very upset about this. We had actually suggested that they kind of break up the non-fiscal stuff, which is what we suggested in the beginning, but they said they couldn't with collective bargaining because it was fiscal. But apparently now it's not fiscal. So I got to believe they have a huge explanation when it comes to everybody in the state of Wisconsin. Obviously, they've been lying about this all along, and they need to be upfront and honest as to why they did what they did. Rachel, they never once said this was about union busting. They never once said this was going after collective bargaining. They said it was about balancing the budget. Well, guess what? They still don't have a balanced budget, but they did it anyways. So their motives are real clear.
In terms of what you just said about this ending up in court, as you and other Democrats seek potential legal redress here, is your intent to roll this back, stop it, repeal what they have done, nullify it? What do you think you can do legally from this point forward?
Well, I obviously think attorneys are going to be looking at it right now, and I got to believe that if we don't, somebody certainly will take the legislature to court over this if it's at all possible. Again, we have open meetings laws in the state of Wisconsin. We have them for a reason. Reason being that we post it so people can know exactly what's going on. You heard what Representative Barker was saying at the table tonight. He hadn't even seen the bill. He hasn't been briefed on it. And all Senator Fitzgerald would say is, you've debated it. We've just taken stuff out. Well, what stuff have you taken out? And why have you taken that stuff out? Obviously, the questions weren't answered. Senator Fitzgerald didn't want to answer any questions. He called the roll and walked out of the room. And a couple of minutes later, the bill's in the state assembly, and they're going to be dealing with it tomorrow. So obviously, lawyers are going to be taking a look at this, and my guess is it will end up in court.
In terms of this as a strategic maneuver, I described it as a rabbit being pulled out of a hat, a previously unidentified rabbit, previously unidentified hat. Yeah. Do you feel like they could have done this all along, and they knew they could have done this all along, and they just decided to spring it on you? Or is what you're saying tonight that this was an illegal action, they know it won't stand, and that's why they didn't do it until they were this desperate?
Well, it was illegal on the open meetings front. There's no doubt about that. And yes, they did pull a rabbit out, but I'm not certain they pull it out of their hat. Let me be clear on that. They could have done this from the very beginning. It was something that we had suggested because we had said that this is not a fiscal item. They insisted up and down the state of Wisconsin that it is, in fact, a fiscal item. And then obviously they changed their mind at the last second, which obviously gets that whole trust issue between Governor Walker and the Senate Republicans. So this might have been a legal way to go about it had they gone through the proper channels when it comes to open meetings, and they didn't do that.
In terms of what happens next, I know that there was some consternation that once it became clear that the Republicans were going to do this tonight, some Democratic senators might race back to the state capitol to try to stop this in some way. Will the Democratic senators now still stay out of the state? Is there any consensus yet among you 14 as to what the appropriate next steps are?
It's a good question. As it stands right now, we're staying out of the state for one simple reason. We don't trust the Senate Republicans. We tried to negotiate. We tried to reach out every single day. We don't trust Governor Walker. We tried to negotiate with him and tried to reach out every single day. Obviously, what the Senate Republicans did tonight, we're all ashamed that they did it. The entire state of Wisconsin are ashamed at those actions tonight. But we're not going to go back because there's still a lot of games they can play. If we were to go back before this passes the assembly or even before it becomes state law, for example, they could call us into special session, which we're in right now. They could call the House. They could lock us in. They could bring up the whole thing again and reinsert the language all over again and make us vote immediately. So, again, it comes to an issue of trust, obviously, with the Senate Republicans. So, no, we're gonna sit tight here for a while. Are
all 14 of you going to sit tight? Is there unanimity among you 14 on this?
Yes, there is.
Wisconsin State Senator Democrat Jon Erpenbach, thanks for your time and helping us sort this out tonight. I imagine we will still be in touch in coming days.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
All right, this is obviously a huge night in the course of this Wisconsin story. And the Wisconsin story was and is and will continue to be a major national story with implications for every state in the union. You want some evidence? Karl Rove, remember him? Karl Rove and his undisclosed billionaire club funders have entered the fray on the Wisconsin story as of today. Filmmaker Michael Moore was in Madison this past weekend. He is here in studio with me tonight. Please stay tuned. Much more on tonight's Republican last-ditch desperation move in Wisconsin with Michael Moore live in studio just ahead. Please stay with us.